Your decisions and choices have led you here, to your end, our cleric says, as he raises his maul above his head in two hands and brings it down with a peal of thunder and a powerful flash of light. When the light clears, the body of his foe is left crumpled and dead on the ground. Welcome to D&D build number 19, a build I am entitling The Gravedigger. My name is Nathan, and I publish these videos about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition once a week on Saturdays or Sundays, depending on my schedule. Now, throughout the course of this video, I will talk about other builds, and if you want to see the math or any of the details about this build, the link to this build as well as all of the others is in a spreadsheet in the description of this video. So let's jump in and get started. So here is our agenda for this video. I will kind of introduce and talk about the build concept. Then I'll talk about our progression from level 1 to level 17. And at each of our kind of key thresholds, so level 6, level 9, level 13, and level 17, I will give a damage report and kind of talk about what this character is capable of and what their tactics are and that kind of thing. And then I will kind of summarize the character as a whole as we close. So let's jump into our introduction and build concept. So for some context, a couple weeks ago, a viewer commented on one of my videos. He asked me to potentially try using Channel Divinity Path to the Grave from Glaive Cleric on a build. Now, what this does is it takes your action, you mark a creature's life force for termination, and then the next time that you or an ally hits the cursed target before the end of your next turn, the target has vulnerability to all the attack's damage, and the curse ends. So basically, the next person on your side to damage them is going to deal double damage. The way that I'm going to build around this, I made some rules for myself. So first of all, we must use our Path to the Grave feature on all of our damage reports, and I'm going to try to trigger it on the same turn as we actually activate it. So this means that we will either need a second action or some way to make an attack with our bonus action. The next rule is I'm going to limit myself to a maximum of 3 total classes. So yes, this is going to be a multi-class character, but I'm not going to go crazy, and we're not going to have more than 3. Also, when possible, I want to have my the class with the most levels should be Cleric. Now, that's not going to be possible in the first 6 levels of this character or so, but by the end and throughout most of our progression, we are going to be mostly a Grave Cleric. All right, so what is this build going to feature then? So this is going to be a mostly support build with the ability to deal pretty punishing burst damage once per short rest when needed to a key target. We're also going to be reasonably durable with pretty solid out of combat utility. Again, a lot of our spells and features are going to be more support oriented. We also are going to have heavy armor proficiency, probably walking around in plate. And we are going to be carrying the biggest, baddest, two-handed bludgeoning weapon that we can, probably a maul. Another cool thing about this character is you bring a little bit of a grim and dark flavor to your RP. You might be a cleric, but you know, when it comes time for an enemy to die, you basically tell them this is your end, and you blow them up, which could be really fun. And I think this character would be pretty fun to RP and have in the party. Even if, you know, they were good, they might have a more dark outlook and that kind of thing. So, the books you'll need for this character, you'll need the Player's Handbook, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. You could potentially use spells from some other additional books, but none of them are really required for the core of how this character is going to work. Also, a big shout out to Colby's One Hit Wonder build. I will post a link to that in the description, as well as you should see a card up there for it. But this is a build that Colby at D4 has done using Path to the Grave. I have seen that video, and I'm not going to try to duplicate his, but it is another very similar Path to the Grave build, and if you wanted to check that out, again, see the link in the description. All right, so let's jump in at level 1, and I'm going to be starting this build actually as a Paladin. Now, the reason for this, Paladins get proficiency with all armor and shields, as well as simple and martial weapons. So in order to get proficiency with the armor and the weapon I want to use, we need to start our career as a Paladin. And so one of our 3 classes, therefore, is going to be Paladin per the limits I place on myself when designing this build. Now, as a first level Paladin, we also get Divine Sense, so we can sense the presence of undead or fey or fiends and that kind of thing. And this is a fun, more of a ribbon feature for Paladins. Also get Lay on Hands. We have a pool of points equal to 5 times our Paladin level. And as an action, we can restore any number of those points to a creature that we touch as health. And if we spend 5 points, we can cure a disease on that creature. We also get proficiency in wisdom saves and charisma saves as a paladin. For our starting race, we're going to take the custom lineage race out of Tasha's. So what this race does, we get a +2 to any one stat of our choice, and then we also get a free feat and can take dark vision or a skill proficiency. It doesn't really matter on the dark vision or skill proficiency. I think I would take dark vision on my character, but the feat that we want here at level 1 is Great Weapon Master. What this does is when we make an attack with a two-handed heavy weapon like a maul, which is what we're going to be using on this build, we can take a -5 penalty to our attack roll to get a +10 bonus to our damage roll. Now, also, if we kill an enemy or score a critical hit when using a weapon of this type, we can also make a single weapon attack as a bonus action. Now, this isn't going to apply to our burst round, but we may be using this in combat to potentially get a second attack in the future. All right. Other options, honestly, you can pick whatever you want. None of the features that I am designing into this build really require you to have a particular race. But that said, we are going to be kind of feat starved because we're going to be bouncing around between classes quite a bit. And so I really like having the extra feat at level 1, so hence the custom lineage for this build. All right, in terms of our stats, we're using the point buy method as always. I'm going to take a 15 in strength and put our racial +2 there. I'm going to take a 13 constitution, a 14 wisdom, and a 13 charisma. This leaves 1 point left over, which I'm just going to throw into dex, but you could put it in intelligence. It doesn't really matter where it goes. Importantly, again, because we want to be a cleric, that's going to be one of our classes, we need at least 13 in wisdom. And because we are a paladin for one of our other classes, we need at least 13 strength and 13 charisma, so hence kind of the stat spread. And again, we want to be mostly a cleric on this build by the end, so hence the higher wisdom than charisma. This gives us a starting hit points of 11, 1 from our constitution, and 10 from being a paladin. In terms of our starting equipment, we want to take the items offered by our class, so I would take our maul. That's our big two-handed bludgeoning weapon. I would take a shield, 5 javelins, and then your chainmail and your holy symbol. And you'll probably want to pick up a component pouch or an arcane focus somewhere in your journey, but it's not going to be immediately important just yet. All right, at level 2, we are going to take our first multi-class dip into Sorcerer. Now, this is going to be the third of our 3 classes, so we're going to be a Paladin, Cleric, Sorcerer on this build, because again, I'm limiting myself to just 3 classes. So, as a first level sorcerer, we get the sorceress spell casting, and we also get our sorceress origin. I'm going to take Divine Soul on this build. I've been using Divine Soul a lot, and I really like it here. I think it fits the flavor of our character pretty well. Kind of story-wise, again, I envision that this is kind of a character who has a connection to some god of death or dying and passing and that kind of thing. And so we're going to be using a lot of divine magic on this character, and I do need sorcerer specifically for how I'm going to make the interaction work so I can path to the grave and make my attack on the same turn. And so Divine Soul, I think, makes a lot of thematic sense on this character, plus there are additional benefits. So as a Divine Soul sorcerer, we get divine magic. So when we pick sorcerer spells, we can pick them off of the cleric list as well. Also get to pick kind of an origin for our divine magic. It doesn't really matter, but I'm going to pick Law, so we have Bless at this level. Bless is going to be our primary concentration spell going forward, at least for some time. This will allow us to bless 3 creatures plus 1 for each level we upcast the spell. Ourself is going to be one of the targets. These creatures get a plus 1d4 bonus to attack rolls and saving throws while you maintain concentration on the spell. Really great buff spell to buff the party and ourselves, especially considering that we're going to be using Great Weapon Master all the time, pretty much. And that's going to be very strong for us. Now, we also get, as a Divine Soul Sorcerer, the Favored by the Gods feature. So once per short rest, when we make an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw, we can roll 2d4 and add them to the result. And we can do this after we see the dice roll, but before the DM says whether the attack or this check hits or misses or succeeds or fails. So we can use this. This is essentially a +5 to your roll on average to actually cancel out the penalty for a Great Weapon Master. Now, the cool thing is you don't actually have to use this on a given roll, but for the sake of my math later on, I'm going to assume that we are using it for our hit chance, but you may not have to use it all the time. Now, As a first level sorcerer, we also get 4 cantrips. And I want Booming Blade. That's going to be our key cantrip, but I also want Green Flame Blade. These are the melee cantrips that let you also make a melee attack as part of casting them. And these are going to be key to how our build is going to work. The rest of the ones, you can kind of pick whatever you want. Don't pick ones that are going to use your casting modifier because our charisma is bad. So I'm going to take Minor Illusion and Mage Hand just for out of combat utility. We have 2 first level spell slots here, and we get to know 2 sorcerer spells, and I would take Shield and Absorb Elements to protect ourselves. Now we have Shield, Absorb Elements, and Bless for kind of our core spells at this level, and our character should be functional at this point. We're going to be in the best heavy armor that we can. Hopefully we can get Plate, but I wouldn't expect to have Plate at level 2. And we're going to be running in and Booming Blading or Green Flame Blading targets with our big 2-handed. All right, at level 3, I'm going to pick up my 3rd class immediately here, and we're going to get Cleric. So as a first level Cleric, we get the Cleric spell casting, and they are a ritual caster, so we can ritual cast any Cleric spell that we have prepared. We also get our Divine Domain here, and I'm going to pick the Grave Domain, of course, because this is the one that gets past the grave, so thus it must be used in the build. This gives us a couple features at this level. We get Circle of Mortality. We learn the Spare the Dying cantrip, and we can cast it as a bonus action at a range of 30 feet. Cool. And then whenever we cast a spell that restores hit points to a target that's a bit unconscious, we don't have to roll the dice, and we instead they get the max possible. Cool thing, and will make the kind of yo-yo healing of this character very powerful. You're going to want to primarily save your healing for targets that are unconscious. But again, you can heal other times too. We also get Eyes of the Grave, and this is a kind of a similar thing to Paladin's Divine Sense, but it lets us see kind of undead and that kind of thing. Now, in terms of our spells, we get to learn a total of 4 cantrips here. And again, this is because we get 3 from being a cleric and then 1 from being a grave cleric. So the ones I'm going to take are Guidance, Toll the Dead, and Word of Radiance for our cleric cantrips, and then we get Spare the Dying from being a grave cleric. Due to the way multi-classing works, we are now a 2nd level caster, which means 3 first level spell slots. We also get the grave cleric subclass casting here. So the spells that they get are Bane and False Life, always prepared. And then the spells I would prepare for my 3 here are going to be Command, Healing Word, and Protection from Evil and Good. We are primarily looking to support our allies and occasionally just run in and bash things with our big maul, because we're going to be a relatively we're going to be pretty hard to hit and pretty durable, but we're not going to have a huge amount of health again because our constitution is pretty low at this point. All right, at level 4, we're going to take our 2nd level in Cleric. This means we get our Channel Divinity once per short rest. We're now a 3rd level caster, so that means 2nd level spell slots, and we don't have 2nd level spells yet because we're not a 3rd level in any one particular class. We can prepare another cleric spell. I would probably prepare Sanctuary, but again, as a cleric, we have access to our whole list, so prepare whatever you want. Now, in terms of our Channel Divinity options, all clerics get Turn Undead, which they can use to make undead run away. But we also get our key thing here, which I wanted for this build, which is Path to the Grave. And I described how this works, but again, as an action, we curse an enemy within 30 feet of us that we can see, and then the next time that we or an ally hits them with an attack before the end of our next turn, that creature has vulnerability to all of that attack's damage, and the curse ends. We can use this once per short rest, and this is going to be, again, the main thing that this build is built around. We also get our Harness Divine Power, so once per long rest, we can spend our Channel Divinity to get back a spell slot of a level equal to half our proficiency modifier rounded up. So that will be a 1st level spell slot here. But again, we're planning on using our Channel Divinity for Path to the Grave. All right, at level 5, we're going to be going back to Sorcerer for just a little bit. So we're going to be a Sorcerer level 2. This means we get Font of Magic, and we get 2 sorcery points. And as a bonus action, we can convert our sorcery points into spell slots per the table in the book. So the 1st and 2nd levels will cost 2 and 3 points respectively, and then making anything from 3rd to 5th going to cost the slot level plus 2. So a 3rd level is 5, a 4th level is 6, and a 5th level is 7 sorcery points. And we can also convert our spell slots into sorcery points at a 1-to-1 ratio. So a 1st level slot is 1 sorcery point. And the power of our cantrips as a 5th level character goes up here. So importantly, our Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade now deal an additional D8 of damage on hit. and we get to learn another sorcery spell here. Now, I would probably learn Magic Missile, but that said, if your table allows the Silvery Barb spell, I would 100% take that instead. And I would also retrain our Bless spell from Divine Soul here into Protection from Evil and Good. And then I would prepare Bless out of Cleric instead. And this is primarily because, we want a spell from our Divine Soul Sorcerer that isn't based on our casting modifier. And I like having Protection from Evil and Good here. All right, at level 6, we are a sorcerer level 3, and this means we get our meta magic. So we get to learn a couple options here to enhance our spells. The ones I'm going to take are Quicken spell. This lets us cast any spell as a bonus action by spending 2 sorcery points, so long as that spell normally took an action to cast. And then I'm also going to take Twin spell, kind of as a support thing. This lets us, when we cast a spell that normally targets only one creature, we can cast it on 2. But we have to spend a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level to do so, and cantrips cost 1 sorcery point. Now, we are a 5th level caster overall here. So we have 3rd level spell slots, and we get to learn our first 2nd level spells here. And the one I would learn is going to be Misty Step off of the sorcerer list to let us teleport around when needed. Now, at this point, it is time for our first damage report. And so let's kind of go through the tactics of this character and talk about how we function. So in the first round, we're going to cast Bless on ourselves and our party just to make everybody stronger and hit more consistently. And then any point in round 2 and beyond, we're going to curse our target with our Path to the Grave. And then we're going to use Quicken spell on Booming Blade. So because we can cast our cantrip as a bonus action, we can now attack on the same turn that we applied Path to the Grave. And then we're going to use our Favored by the Gods feature, so that extra 2d4, to help us potentially land the hit. So here is our attack at this point. We have a +1 to hit plus 3d4. So 1 from Blessed and 2 from Favored by the Gods. And this is with Great Weapon Master on. And our attack is going to do 2d6 plus 13 bludgeoning damage, plus an additional d8 of thunder damage. And all of that will be doubled from Path to the Grave. Now, I'm not going to include the damage from the target moving in this calculation at this point, because they're still going to be in melee with us, so they can probably move if they want to. They can probably just attack us, and so I won't guarantee the Booming Blade bonus damage at this point. So therefore, against a target with an armor class of 10 and no bonus to their saves, we would do 47.8 damage with this single hit. And against an enemy with an armor class of 15 and +5 to their saves, we would do 36.6 damage. Now, compared to the other burst builds I've made to this point, this is the absolute worst at level 6, but it's honestly not that bad. And all things considered, I think this would be a really fun character to play. We are walking around and blessing our allies and maybe throwing out cleric cantrips and that kind of thing, and bonking enemies with our big maul. But when the time comes, we tell an enemy, it's your time to die, and we put them in the grave. And so, yeah, this would be a really fun character to play, and just the fact that you can say, oh yeah, I do 50 damage, or something like that when you hit, is just going to be really fun and really cool. But it's actually only going to get better from here, and we're about to hit kind of the sweet spot of this character. So at level 7, we're going to take a 2nd level in Paladin. This gives us Paladin spellcasting, and it also gives us Divine Smite. Now, this is one of the big things that we want here. So what this does is when we hit an enemy with a melee weapon attack, and that can be a hit from our Booming Blade because we still make a melee attack as part of that, we can spend a spell slot, and we get to add a number of d8s of radiant damage equal to the level of the spell slot +1, and it's capped at 5d8. Which is a 4th level slot. You can use higher level slots to smite with, but they'll still do that 5d8 radiant damage. And then there's a potential bonus extra 1d8 if your target is an undead or a fiend. Now, because we're going to be mostly a full caster on this character, we're going to get to those 4th level slots pretty quickly, and we're going to be able to pump out a lot of damage with this Divine Smite. Now, we also get a fighting style here. And the one I would probably take on this character is Interception. This lets us use our reaction to reduce damage to an ally that's nearby us, and I think fits well with the kind of support style of this character. That said, if you wanted to take defense to boost your armor class, absolutely a good choice. And if you're probably going to be on the front line, and so that might be a good thing to do for your survivability. Although, again, we do have shield, absorb elements, and potentially silvery barbs to use to defend ourselves, and hopefully have plate mail by this point. We can prepare 2 paladin spells at this level, and honestly, pick whatever you want. Pick your favorites. There is a fair amount of overlap with the cleric spell list. Maybe you start preparing bless off of here, but whatever you prepare, don't take ones that are heavily dependent on your spellcasting modifier because we're never going to really bump our charisma on this character. All right, at level 8, we are going back to cleric. This means that we now get second level cleric spells, and due to the way that multiclassing works, we are now a 7th level caster, so we get our first 4th level spell slot. Now, honestly, you can prepare whatever you want here. There's nothing that's crucial to our kind of damage output. And as a Grave Cleric, we get General Repose and Ray of Enfeeblement always prepared. And I would probably prepare, say, Enhance Ability or Aid or Spiritual Weapon and that kind of thing. Again, prepare what your party needs and what is needed in your situation for your character. At level 9, we are going to be a Cleric 4, and we get our next ability score increase or feat. And I'm going to take the Ritual Caster feat. This is out of the Player's Handbook, and this is the first time I've used this feat. So when you learn this feat, you get a Ritual book, and you get to pick any class that is a Ritual Caster. You're going to pick Wizard. And you also get to learn 2 ritual spells off of that class's list that go into your Ritual book. Now, the key one that I want here is Find Familiar. And for the second one, pick whatever you want. There are a lot of cool ones. I might take just Identify. And then throughout the course of our adventure, if we find wizard spells that are rituals, we can potentially transcribe them into our Ritual book and learn them. So this will be a really nice thing for utility and that kind of thing. But the Find Familiar, and I've used this on a lot of builds recently, we get to summon a familiar. We're going to want to use the Owl Familiar. I think it's generally the most durable because it has the ability to not provoke opportunity attacks. And we're going to use this to give ourselves the help action so that we can make our big Path to the Grave, Booming Blade, Maul Smack with advantage. Now, you can probably flavor your familiar as whatever you want. It could be an owl, could be a hawk, could be a vulture. But just make sure to clarify with your DM that you want to use the owl stat block. Now, as a 4th level cleric, we also get to learn another cantrip here. I would probably learn Sacred Flame, and we are an 8th level full caster, which means another 4th level spell slot. And again, we can prepare another cleric spell. Prepare your favorite. I might prepare Aid at this level. All right, but at level 9, it is time for our next damage report. So, what has changed since last time? Well, we've gained Divine Smite. And we also have 4th level spell slots to pump into that. So that is the cap. We can do an extra 5 to 8 of radiant damage. We've also gained Find Familiar for advantage on our attack. And we've gotten some 2nd level spells. In terms of our tactics, they haven't really changed except for we have added our Familiar to give us help for our attack, which means we can quicken a Booming Blade with help. Depending on how your DM does it, it should be able to be fine for you to have set up. And we're also going to apply a 4th level Divine Smite when we smack our target. So, in terms of our damage numbers, we now have a +2 plus 3d4 with advantage to hit. And we will do 2d6 plus 13 bludgeoning damage and that d8 of thunder damage. And then we've got 5d8 of radiant damage that we're going to stack up on top of that. And all of this damage is doubled. So, at this point, against a target with an armor class of 10 and no bonus to their saves, we would do an average of 100.4 damage. And if their armor class is 16 with +6 to their saves, we would do an average of 93.6 damage. Our hit chance at this point is pretty darn high. And since last time, this is an increase of over 50 points in both cases, and we have increased our damage by 100 to 150%. Now, in terms of my other burst builds at this point, we are pretty much behind everybody that is a dedicated burst build, including the baseline fighter builds. But again, we are primarily a support character, and so the ability for our character to just dish out this massive 100 damage hit, again, super fun, and I think this character, again, would be really fun to play. You're basically helping everybody out, and then when it's time for someone to die, wham, and they're gone. So you should be pretty flexible, and the fact that you can do a lot of damage when needed, I think would make this character very effective, even though we don't reach some of the burst levels I've made on a lot of builds in the past. All right, at level 10, we are going to take another level in Sorcerer. Now, these kind of mid-level progression from 10 to 13, there's a lot of different ways to do it. If you just take 4 levels of Cleric, you will actually get a little bit more damage against the lower armor classes. But the way that I'm going to take I think is going to yield a more fun and effective character overall, even though you won't do quite as much damage in those cases, but you will do a lot more damage against enemies with higher armor classes, which I think is generally more realistic for a real game. So, as a 4th level sorcerer, we get our next ability score increase or feat, and I'm going to take the Crusher feat, and this is a half feat. You can bump your strength or constitution. I'm going to bump our strength to 18. Additionally, what this does is once per turn, when we deal bludgeoning damage to a creature, we can move them 5 feet in any direction to an open square, provided they are no more than one size larger than us. Additionally, when we crit with bludgeoning damage, all attacks against that creature have advantage until the start of our next turn. Basically, we've crushed them and their defenses are very down. Now, what this will let us do is when we bonk our enemy with our booming blade, we can now shove them 5 feet away from us and hopefully not within reach of anybody. So on their turn, if they want to attack, they will have to move and therefore take the booming blade damage. So at this point, I am going to start adding the booming blade secondary damage into our damage calculations, applied at a chance of our hit rate. And overall, even when you're just walking around in combat and bonking people not on your burst turn, this is going to make you very effective because enemies are going to have to choose between basically doing nothing or taking the booming blade damage if they want to run up and melee somebody. We also get to learn another sorcerer cantrip here. Pick your favorite. I might take Mold Earth. I think it has a lot of utility. We are up to 5th level spell slots at this point, and we get to learn a 2nd level sorcerer spell. Honestly, I would pick your favorite here. You can pick off the cleric list, but we, pick off the cleric list with our higher wisdom. So I would pick a sorcerer spell like, say, Invisibility. It could give our party a lot of utility, especially if upcast. We could potentially make our entire party invisible at this point. All right, at level 11, we are going to be a 5th level cleric. This means that we get the destroy undead feature. So if we successfully turn any undead of a CR 1/2 or lower, they're instantly destroyed. You probably won't be seeing CR 1/2 undead at this point in a campaign, but it could be useful when you do see them. And the power of our cantrips also goes up here, so that's an additional D8 of damage for Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade on hit, as well as an additional D8 of secondary damage for both of those spells. We are now fortunately up to 3rd level cleric spells, and we have Revivify and Vampiric Touch always prepared as a grave cleric. And I would probably prepare Spirit Guardians and Mass Healing Word now that we have access to those. Now, in terms of our primary damage setup, I'm going to now assume that we're going to be using Spirit Guardians. We're not dealing damage only with Path of the Grave, and Spirit Guardians is a very effective spell. That said, our Constitution is not the best, so our concentration checks are not the greatest on this character, so you might consider, sticking with Bless or something like that, so you're a lower priority target. But for the sake of damage, when I do the calculations, I'm going to assume it's Spirit Guardians from here on out. At level 12, we are going to be a 6th level cleric. This means that we get a 2nd use of Channel Divinity per short rest, and we can also harness Divine Power twice per long rest. And as a Grave Cleric, we get Sentinel at Death's Door. This is a really cool feature. What it does is we can use our reaction when one of our allies within, I think, 60 feet of us takes a crit, and we can turn it into a normal hit. So it'll help the survivability of everybody. And we can prepare an additional Cleric spell here. Again, pick your favorite. But the important thing is we now have 2 charges of Channel Divinity per short rest. So you could potentially burst twice in a combat, or, as we're going to get at our level 13, potentially make a key hit land. Because at level 13, we're taking a 3rd level in Paladin. This gives us divine health, so we're immune to disease and that kind of thing. Okay, it's a fun ribbon feature. But we also get our Sacred Oath here, and I'm going to take the Oath of Conquest. This gives us a couple additional Channel Divinity options. Importantly, these share Channel Divinity charges with our Cleric, so if we use either of these, that will use up our Channel Divinities, and we have 2 at this point. So the options that we have are Conquering Presence. We can use this to potentially imbue a fear effect on all creatures of our choice within 30 feet of us. But the save DC on this is going to be pretty low because our charisma is bad. But the one we want here is Guided Strike. So what this does is we can suspend use of our Channel Divinity to get a potential plus 10 bonus to an attack roll, and we can choose to use this after seeing the roll, but before the DM decides whether it hits or misses. So if you're going in on that key enemy with your Path to the Grave and you roll terribly, even though you have advantage, and you have Favored by the Gods, and it still isn't going to hit, you can potentially throw in a plus 10 with Guided Strike in your 2nd charge of Channel Divinity to make that hit land, which is going to be fantastic. We also get a couple of Paladin spells that we have always prepared from Conquest Paladin, and we get Armor of Agathis and Command. Now, I put the asterisk on Command because we already have Command from Cleric, and our Cleric Command is much better. But Armor of Agathis is actually really good. This is a spell that gives us temporary hit points 5 times the level that we cast it at. And then whenever an enemy does melee damage to us, they take a number of damage equal to the maximum pool of the Armor of Agathis, even if it's not full. So we are a character that's going to be upcasting a lot of spells, and this is a spell that upcasts really well and is a great tool to have in our arsenal. Now, at level 13, it is time for our next damage report. So what has changed since last time? Well, we've bumped our strength to 18 and gained Crusher, and the power of our cantrips has gone up, and now we're going to be guaranteeing, well, quote unquote guaranteeing the Booming Blade damage on the movement. We've gained Spirit Guardians, which we can cast with a 6th level slot, and we have 2 uses of our Channel Divinity and Guided Strike. We also have various defense and utility options. So what do our tactics look like now? Well, we're going to cast Spirit Guardians at its max level, so level 6, and our Familiar is going to help us for our attack. And then in any point in round 2 and beyond, we're going to Path to the Grave our target, quicken our Booming Blade on him with the help, so we have advantage. Then we'll use Favored by the Gods and or Guided Strike to help land the hit. And then we'll apply our 4th level Divine Smite and push the target 5 feet with Crusher. Importantly, remember, targets only take damage from Booming Blade if they move willingly, so the force movement will not trigger the damage, but if they want to come attack you or anybody else, they will probably have to move, so therefore we can consider the damage as consistent. So our Booming Blade at this point now has a +4, +2d4, +10 to hit with advantage, potentially. So we're again, I'm including the Guided Strike because it makes us supernaturally accurate. And this attack will do 2d6 plus 14 bludgeoning damage plus 2d8 thunder with an additional 5d8 radiant damage from Divine Smite and doubled from Path to the Grave. And then if the target moves, they will take 3d8 thunder damage from Booming Blade. And we have a 6d8 radiant damage from Spirit Guardians at a save DC of 15. So against a target with an armor class of 10 and no bonus to their saves, we would do 148.7 damage on average in our burst round. And against an enemy with an armor class of 17 and +7 to their saves, it would be 143.9. Now, this is actually, again, we are still behind pretty much everybody that's a dedicated burst build, but we've actually caught our baseline fighter builds against the higher armor classes. So again, overall, really happy with where this character is. We have, we're probably not going to be doing Spirit Guardians, and it's about 20 points of damage. Especially if enemies target us as soon as we start concentrating on a spell. But when we need to, we can about a lot of damage and kill targets. And again, really fun at this point. And we have scaled, not too bad. And since last time, this is an increase of 48 to 54%. And I think we are just growing stronger, and we can kill important targets when needed. We're not going to be the star of the show in combat, but when people need to die, we can kill them. All right, level 14, we are going to take another level in Paladin. There's an ability score increase our feat just hanging right here. And I'm going to use this chance to get Resilient Constitution and bump our Constitution to 14. This bumps our total hit points over 100 and gives us proficiency in Constitution saves. So we should be able to now hopefully reliably keep up Spirit Guardians or Bless or whatever other concentration spells you want to use. And we can prepare another 1st level Paladin spell here. Prepare whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. At level 15, we're going back to Cleric, so we're now a Cleric 7. Due to the way that multiclassing works, we now have a 7th level spell slot. We get Blight and Death Ward, always prepared out of Grave Cleric, and you can pick whatever you want for 4th level Cleric spells to prepare. Something like Banishment is good, but again, if it requires a save, our save DC is not very high because our Wisdom is only 14, so pick whatever you want that best suits your party's needs. At level 16, we're going to be a Cleric 8. This gives us another ability score increase or feat, and I'm going to take this chance to bump our strength to 20 and cap it. Our Destroy Undead now destroys Undead of CR 1 or less, and we're going to take the Blessed Strikes feature out of Tasha's instead of our subclass feature here. So what this does is when we damage an enemy with a weapon attack or a cantrip once per turn on our turn, we can add a D8 of radiant damage to it. This will be doubled from Path to the Grave, so this is a great thing to have. We can prepare another Cleric spell. Again, pick whatever you want. Now, at level 17, our final level, we're going to take one more level in Sorcerer here. Due to the way that multiclassing works, we are now a 15th level caster, so we have an 8th level spell slot. We get the magical guidance feature out of Sorcerer. This lets us spend a sorcery point to reroll a failed ability check. Could be useful. We'll see how many ability checks you're doing that matter as this character at this point. And the power of our cantrips goes up one more time here. Now, in terms of the spell, I would learn we now can get third level sorcerer spells, and I would honestly take counterspell. It's going to be a great thing to have to defend yourself and the party. And then I'd potentially pick my least favorite spell and retrain it into fly or some other kind of utility spell that we could potentially twin to kind of support our party. Level 17 here, it is time for our final damage report. So what has changed since last time? Well, we've capped our strength at 20. We've gained Blessed Strikes for another D8 of radiant damage. Our cantrip scaling has gone up, so that's another D8 of damage on hit for Booming Blade and another D8 of secondary damage. We also have 8th level spell slots to cast Spirit Guardians with, and we've gotten some additional defense and utility. Our tactics haven't really changed. We're casting Spirit Guardians out at the max level we can, so level 8, and then we're doing our whole combo. So our Booming Blade at this point has a +6, +2d4, +10 to hit with advantage thanks to our Find Familiar, doing 2d6 +15 bludgeoning damage, +3d8 thunder damage from Booming Blade, and an additional d8 of radiant damage from Blessed Strikes. We still have 5d8 of radiant damage to apply with a 4th level Divine Smite, and all of that damage gets doubled from Path to the Grave. Importantly, this is a +21 to hit on average with both Guided Strike and Favored by the Gods. So your chance to hit any creature from like an AC of 22 or lower is 399 out of 400. You will only miss if you roll 2 natural ones. So you're going to be supremely accurate at this point to land those hits. The extra damage from Booming Blade is 4d8 thunder, and our Spirit Guardian says 8d8 radiant damage at a save DC of 16. So against an enemy with an armor class of 10 and no bonus to their saves, we would do 183.5 damage. And against an enemy with an AC of 18 and +8 to their saves, it would be 176.3. Now, the damage from Spirit Guardians is 20 to 30 points. The rest of the damage here is just from that single Booming Blade hit. So it's going to hit for about 160, 150 damage, something like that, if you include the damage from the target moving. Since last time, this is an increase of 23% in both cases, and compared to my other builds, we are actually ahead of the baseline fighter builds at this point that I made, although we're pretty much behind everybody else. A lot of my dedicated burst damage dealers could do this kind of damage at level 9 or level 13. That said, again, we're mostly a support character with the ability to pump out burst damage when needed, and I think overall we've been pretty effective. So it is time to summarize. So what is the overall score of this character? Now, to get this, I take all of our numbers at all of our damage reports and I average them together into one number. And for this character, that is a 116.3. Now, compared to my other builds, this is actually better than my crossbow rune knight that I made a few weeks ago. And we're better than my dedicated support warlord build, but we're pretty much behind everybody else, and that's kind of to be expected. Again, this is primarily a support character that I've kind of built around a little bit of a gimmick for burst damage. So, how would I take this character to level 20? Well, there's 3 options. I'm honestly not sure which one I would do. It would probably depend pretty heavily on my campaign. So the first one is Sorcerer 8. This gives us access to 4th level sorcerer spells, namely Polymorph, that we could potentially twin to save allies, turning them into, say, giant apes and giving them like 150 health buffer. And we also get another ability score increase this way, which we could use to, say, bump our wisdom to 16 or maybe get Warcaster or something like that. Another option here is Paladin 6, Cleric 9. This gives us extra attack, Aura of Protection for +1 to all of our saves, as well as nice 5th level Cleric spells for additional utility. Another option here is Cleric 11. This gives us Divine Intervention, as well as 6th level and 5th level Cleric spells. I think the Paladin one probably sounds the most appealing to me. But one of the things with this build in particular is because I was building around triggering Path to the Grave on a single turn, extra attack just wasn't really that appealing for the way the burst damage works. And generally speaking, for any build using Path to the Grave, you have to consider, how is a single attack doubled better than, say, if you have action surge, just making 2 more attacks? And the answer is no. So if you have extra attack and action surge, say from fighter, just making 4 attacks is better than making 1 attack with double damage and then another attack. And so really, if you are a cleric with Path of the Grave, you are really all in invested on this single big hit. That said, having extra attack would be wonderful for when we're just running around bonking people and being a general support, and could make this character more effective, which is probably why I would take it if I was going to take this character to level 20. But yeah, we are a support character with an occasional big swing of burst damage. And at the last level, we did approximately 134 damage on a single swing on average, plus another 18 from our booming blade movement, for a total of like 152-ish damage, pretty much at any enemy AC up to like 23, which is pretty silly. And it's not like insane compared to some of my other burst characters, but your ability to reliably pump out a massive bit of damage to potentially kill an enemy or cripple a key target, I think would make this support character really fun to play, because there's more to you than just I help you, but oh, let's dunk on this guy. Another cool thing is that all of these options will take you to a 17th level caster by level 20, and we are a 15th level full caster at this point, with 8th level spell slots. Even though we don't have any spells that are higher than 4th level, the ones that we do have do upcast pretty well. I would be fine with burning a high level spell slot on counter spells, for example. We also have a pretty full suite of defensive spells on this character, which I think is something that would help them frontline, especially as a melee type cleric. We've got shield, absorb elements, potentially silvery barbs if it's allowed, as well as counterspell that we got at sorcerer 5. Again, our non-burst damage turns, we're probably walking around with Booming Blade and bonking people with Crusher, and I was trying to get that online as soon as possible while still having a kind of an effective character overall. And so even though we are supporting, we still get to make attack rolls and bonk people, which I think would be pretty fun. So thanks for watching. This has been the Gravedigger Path to the Grave Cleric. Thank you to the viewer who commented and challenged me to basically to do this. I kind of took the challenge up on myself, and I thought this was pretty fun. Overall, again, I think this would be a really fun character to play, potentially in a one-shot or potentially even in a longer campaign. I think they have a pretty compelling story and could make for a really fun character. So thanks for watching. My name is Nathan, and I will see you next time.